All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is going to be a probably long, somewhat rambling discussion of the upcoming rotation. I'm really excited to have a bunch of SnareBears on here. I think it's going to be a really fun conversation. I enjoyed the one we had before the last rotation. I think this one should be a lot of fun as well. I'm going to pass it off to Jonas to introduce himself first.
Hi, Jeff. I'm Jonas, TBU3K on some socials, and I've been playing since about 2015 around Lunar Cycle. I done reasonably well, but mostly do a lot of deck building and stuff like that. Y'all remember Data Leak Reversal back in the day? That was my first kind of fun deck that I put together. But I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Cool. John, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, I'm John Janktivist. I started playing around 2014. Fun fact, when my wife and I got into the game, I did not want to buy into the game because I didn't understand how it was different than Magic the Gathering, which I bounced off of real quick. And so I was obviously pretty wrong about that. I've also done fairly well in tournaments over the past few years. I guess the first deck that I fell in love with was some variation of Noise, probably Anatomy of Anarch or whatever that deck was called back in the day.
That was sure a deck. I've... All right, D, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Hi, I'm DR. My screen name is Deer. Really creative there. I started playing during the Ashes cycle. My first favorite deck was Oracle Mageank with all of every single type of faction, every single type of card. I have done reasonably okay in tournaments. I make all the decks that you don't want to play on JNets.
It's really accurate, though.
I'd have to say that you're probably the de facto deck builder of the group right now.
All the mean decks. But yeah, but I'm excited because I didn't play when Data and Destiny or Flashpoints came out, so it was nice to look at the cards and see, oh, that one's going. Thank goodness.
But anyway, Kat, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, hi, I'm Kat. I also go by Kisora online. I do a bunch of art stuff, which some of you may know me by. I started playing during pretty much when Data and Destiny came out, actually. And my favorite kind of deck, well, my favorite deck was IG-49, and I still enjoy making different types of murder decks, so that's always nice.
Very cool. Well, I mean, as someone who conveniently dipped out through the IG-49 period, maybe I'll have to get you to do a record reconstructor, and you can show me how that deck worked.
It was very fun, Jeff.
But we're here to talk about rotations. We've got, I think, probably one of the potentially one of the most impactful rotations so far. Though I guess all of them have been pretty impactful, but like this one's quite impactful, I think, for what it's going to do to the game. I think let's start with Data and Destiny. I'm going to crib from Kenny's excellent podcast where he talked about how when this was released, everyone was like, oh, NBN is already the most powerful faction, so they don't need a very powerful box. Instead, they got this box, which is full of powerful NBN cards. But I almost think we might want to start the whole discussion with a card that is a neutral agenda, because I think to me, it is maybe the most important Corp card that's rotating in the game right now, and that's of course Global Food Initiative.
Yeah, I mean, what's like? There's a lot to say about this. Like, I mean, it it's really just like I think the biggest thing with Global Food Initiative is just that you can play it alongside an all 2-pointer deck, right?
Yeah, I think it's when we think about like the precision design decks that and like that was based on GFI. Before that, we had the Argus decks that were on GFI. and that was like a big part of their game plan. Like all of these decks that like are trying to score agendas. Usually, we're playing Global Food Initiative. Like it was just it helps that scoring plan if you're trying to score 4-2s a lot by making your R&D just way, or your centrals way less leaky on points.
Right. It means the runner has to steal 4 agendas to win instead of 3 most of the time, which is a pretty huge difference.
I would say
Yeah, and
2 types of decks that do GFI. There's the all 2-pointer decks where GFI literally represents you need to steal an extra agenda that we don't need to score the extra version of. And then you have decks like Argus, Sports, or like Fake Points, NBN, where simply controlling the number of agenda points in your deck was especially important because all of those allow you to make sure that your agendas are fundamentally a bit safer since there are fewer of them and the opponent can get more agenda points in their score area.
yeah, I think that's a
just
good
for
point as well. Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
and
John,
just
you can go.
no, yeah, my bad. Yeah, and just so for clarification on that point, right? In those decks, you're not really planning to score those GFIs yourself.
Yeah, and there's a lot like there's a lot of sportsmanal decks that will run like 2 GFIs and then a bunch of audacities. And it's like, yeah, they don't really have realistic plans for scoring the global foods, but they're just a way to keep the agenda density low without sacrificing a lot of points out of centrals while they're getting stolen.
Yeah, and let's not forget the
Definitely.
TV version of the decks also that ran GFI, which operated by the same 4-2 principles. They have to score another one than us, but then how PV is able to go so quickly that difference between scoring 3 versus stealing 4 actually just becomes quite immense. And then the counterplay to GFI obviously has been Mad Dash, and so one of the questions I guess is what's the role of Mad Dash now that GFI is going away, among about 8,000 other questions.
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean, to me, the biggest one's going to be like, can you make a PD style deck with just 4-2s and 3-2s in it, or does that go away and you have to start playing 5-3s, which then make the decks like pretty appreciably worse? Like, yes, Ikoa is self-defensive, but like for the PD, for example, right? But it's like, oh, if the runner steals an Ikoa, like early in the game, you immediately feel like you're behind tempo and under the gun because it's now just two more touches and the game's over.
Yeah,
Which
it's
like
really it's interesting that like you can either go play the beefy 5-3 Ikawas, or you can start going under a little bit, and every faction has a 2-1 now.
Mm-hmm.
So especially with PD, you've got your 2-1. You get back whatever econ or trick you need. A lot of factions might just go under a little bit with their 2-1 of choice.
yeah,
That's what I was thinking the direction might be.
it means multi-axis on centrals gets a bit stronger, doesn't it? With the corpse running a higher agenda density in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, when we think about like the central pressure, like wake implant gets better, twinning gets better, deep dive maybe gets a little bit. Well, I mean, no, it gets better if people run 5-3s. It gets worse if people run 2-1s. So, some interesting multi-axis there, and presumably there'll be some new multi-axis in the upcoming set. I'd be a little surprised there was none, but.
You heard it here first. Jeff said that they're printing multi-access.
Should we move on to NBN and talk about their actual cards? Because I think there's like the other neutral. Okay, there's actually a neutral that's probably worth talking about, but not for like quite a while. So should we move on to the NBN cards? Anyone have one they feel they're going to particularly miss?
New Angeles Soul.
Good call. I mean,
Some
it's the
quizzes.
best. It's the best flex deck right now, right? Like, beat your opponent while you're playing New Angeles Soul, and you get a special bonus gold star.
I think more seriously, like talking about a card like Newshound, probably like this card was everywhere for a long time. Like it was, Jones was talking about before the call. It was getting splashed everywhere, and I think it's like, yeah, this card's unplayable at the current date because every current is banned. But I mean, this card
Yeah, like
was
the
a big
entire
part of the market.
meta, it was centered around, who could play down scarcity of resources or targeted marketing versus, the counterplay of employee strike. And, at least like, a half to two-thirds of the game was just Newshound ended the run just straight up. And it had that little face check punishment as well. Like it was back in the day, it was quite the player.
Yeah, breaking new sound for 6 with something like MK was horrible. It just felt terrible every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Turnpike's probably the biggest of the ices that are actually seeing play very powerful, because Turnpike is also 2 strength and cost a very similar number for anything except MK Ultra. Because of the -1, Turnpike is still 2 costs for Book Altar, which is a super relevant number. Any ice that you can res and costs as much to break as you res is almost always going to see some play in NBN. The Trace 5 is like a very significant number. It's not a hard end the run, which means that of the NBN sentries that might see play, we might see more of the big ones like Hydra, which will end the run. So you see some more stocks for killers. But it'll be tough to say. But that one's just like, honestly, very, very good.
Yeah, I mean, like other NBN sentries that give tags and stuff like that, they're nowhere near as efficient. Like, I think that, one of the next, the sentries that kind of come close to it are like Unsmiling Sfarina and what is it, F2P?
Yeah.
And they both cost like twice as much to give a tag, and they're a little bit more punishing. But the whole two to res bit, like you can install click for two and your turnpikes are now live again.
Yeah, 2 to res, and again to D's point, right? Immediately costs you 1 no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That
in
mini,
a
that mini
Bologna
tax.
world, like it can be pretty relevant.
To toss up another card out there, I mean, I think the rotation of 15 minutes is interesting. I don't necessarily think at this point though it's meta shattering. 15 minutes had that wonderful way of just representing that 7th point if you ever needed it, or to just kind of fill out to 20 points in your agenda suite without necessarily being a risky agenda to include unless your opponent steals it for their 7th point. With something like post dividend truth now, though, I'm not entirely sure how big of a hit 15 minutes is. I mean, I know in the oh god, I'm like blank. Oh, the Asmari deck that we've been playing around with, and a lot of people have been playing around with, for example, that's been pretty relevant in that deck, where mostly you have your 3 Bolognas, you have 3 Cryptocrash, you have your Tomorrow's Headline, and the 15 minutes sort of rounds it out. But I don't really know how big of a deal just slotting that 15 that post dividend truth or whatever post truth dividend card is instead.
So I think one of
Yeah,
the big themes in NBN in general has been just kind of like fake points. Like I'm looking at some of the other cards in here. You got your quantum predictive model and your
Yeah.
news team, and all of these are like, either they give you negative points or if you're tagged, if you run through like a fun house or something like that, quantum predictive model just doesn't even count for you anymore. So like I think that a lot of these kind of fake points along with Global Food Initiative, which is also, worth less points than printed. It should, especially out of NBN, make it so that agendas are a lot more stealable.
Yeah, I think I'm going to quickly shout out a couple of cards, but I don't think we need to talk about them. Resistor used to be a real meta force, but that was in a very, very kind of different meta. That was a more DLR meta from what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Archangel
it was a prominent
Angel.
card in 2018 Worlds,
Oh yeah,
right?
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just being a zero strength, zero to the res barrier that does end the run a decent chunk of the time was pretty important at the time.
So the old heads will definitely remember Archangel, which you played in a lot of CTM decks and stuff like that. Things like Boomerang and Botulus weren't really around to deal with it efficiently. And you were facing against a lot of decks with things like medium in them, and so if you hit it on a medium run, it was often very painful to just kind of fire when you were digging there.
Pretty much all the tramp ice is gone, which I think means, again, that central runs become more valuable.
Yeah. Well, there's probably one person in the comments saying, when you're going to talk about 24/7 news cycle. This is the section where we talk about it. This card's been banned despite being probably very difficult to play in the current meta. I think it's one of those. This card was very potent with breaking news because of a bunch of weird different interactions. Though obviously there's basically set up a score 2 agendas, and then you have a instant kill for very little cost.
So with 24/7 banned, what's the new worst card on the ban lists?
Well, we haven't gotten to
Drago.
Flashpoint
Yeah. All-Seeing Eye is probably also worth mentioning. This again isn't a card that's really seeing any play, but has been a perennial meta tech answer for various matchups and things.
And so another thing that I had looked at a little bit is special offer. A lot of ob decks had been playing some special offers. I believe the Beblum deck from Worlds played some special offers, or maybe it was But I know that a lot of
It
people were
played
playing
2, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can use it to fetch Rashidas and Spin Doctors and stuff like that out of up, and it's influence is definitely constrained in that deck, so I can understand definitely not playing it, but it was definitely something that you had to keep in the back of your mind when you're playing against op. And it's going away now.
Yeah. I think it's also worth shouting out very quickly Assassin, which I remember being a big deal, even though I think this card is been completely power crept out of relevancy.
Yeah.
At the time, a 7 cost 5 strength, trace 5, trace 4 was quite good, or at least relevant enough that people were playing it.
Yeah, you had this in Blue Sun in particular.
Yeah.
Can I just give a quick mention about the All-Seeing Eye as being just one of those cards where I personally always forget that there's a last sentence there with it. But, All-Seeing Eye and even NAPD contract back in the day, right? Where I'm like, oh wait, there's that last sentence. Wait, you can just remove bad publicity to prevent this from happening. Oh, if I have bad publicity, I actually have to score NAPD contract as a 5/2 or something like that. Who remembers that? Does anybody remember that? I don't.
So many games where someone goes score, advance, score an NAPD contract, and then their opponent, one of the two, hopefully their opponent remembers, because the person scoring it definitely didn't, and it was one of those things that was impossible to remember.
Yeah.
Sounds like that score has been invalidated.
All right. Well,
thank you for showing me your 4 advanced, NAPD contract now that I need to go get.
Yeah, now let me go and steal that with my, oh wait, never mind, 4 credits is still too much, because this
It's
is
an hack. It's fine.
free econ float.
Yeah. Like,
All right, well, we should talk about the other the runner half of this box, which is the mini factions. And I'll say probably we're going to talk about this mostly from like a competitive card level. There's a lot of people who really love the mini factions like thematically and as a play experience. And so it's for those people like this is going to be a huge loss. From a competitive perspective, there's definitely cards that we care about, but it's not a ton, I would say, or it's, you know,
So,
it's
so can I ask, are we allowed to spoil the 7 new mini factions that Nisei's, or sorry, Null Signal is putting out for the new set?
we'll keep those under wraps for now.
Okay.
Every match gets all becomes its own mini faction.
I almost want to just go through this alphabetically, and we can just start with Apocalypse, which I think is, you know,
Apocalypse is definitely not the first alphabetically. We have Adam and Always Be Running.
and Apex. But you know what? It's at the top. It's the second card in set order that isn't Apex, who is perennially irrelevant. But Apocalypse is quite
Wow.
relevant. So
Poor Apex.
He has the most relevant cards being lost, though.
I think Apocalypse being lost is pretty relevant. But
No, that's my point. Apex has the most lost cards.
I'm sorry, I misheard you.
Apocalypse, Heartbeats, Reaver, Hunting Grounds. Apex has done a lot of service to the runner tech community.
Yeah, I can't believe Apocalypse is rotating. I think I'm sort of just in denial about that. And I'm just going to have to start working on, you know, I guess my exploit decks instead.
I mean, shout out to Deep Dive. You know, it is a fun, you know, not really a replacement at all, but it's got some cool art on it.
Thanks,
yeah,
Jonas.
thanks, Kat.
All right, let's go back to Apocalypse and how I'm really gonna miss it. My goodness, you guys, I can't believe it's going. It's, you know, it was the ultimate reset. You know, and every card game, you know, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Flesh and Blood, Boy Crazy, like all of them have some sort of a reset button, and this was the big one. Like, and you know, regardless of its power level, you know, there's always been like, you know, ebbs and flows where it's been good, it's been bad, but like one of the things that I loved about it was it's just this pure simplicity. Like, you go back to, you know, nothing installed both sides. It's just one ID versus the next, and you know, it encourages, you know, running, a lot of running, and you know, on the runner side, like you have to build in a way that you can, you know, build back afterwards. So you need to have like multiple copies of breakers, um, and you know, it was just, you know, being hit on the other side of an apocalypse, it really sucks. But like, you know, and I've had that happen to me a lot. But it also just makes it so that you don't have to do a whole lot of math. Like, you know, there's, you know, very complicated board states a lot of the time where you feel like, okay, so I have to let some of these subs fire, I have to break some of these subs, and I've got, you know, gazillion different, you know, companions or recurring credits that I have to, you know, fiddle with every turn. And it's just nice to be able to just start off from scratch and be like, okay, cool, I can just run centrals and not have to pay anything and flip up a card and see if I get lucky.
Yeah, and like there was a lot of art and skill in timing it from both sides. Like as the Corp, once you started figuring out they were on the game plan, you like had to figure out how you could bait it while investing the least amount of resources and have the most recovery that you could make happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then like as the runner, you want like if you apoc'd prematurely and like didn't get any points from it and like spent a lot, like it would set you back. So there was a lot of like push and play in the gameplay that it created, which I thought was like fun to explore.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a advocate of APOC early, APOC often, right? But being that aggressive with APOC, you definitely have to be cognizant, Jeff. I think of all of those things that you're talking about. I think a lot of the difficulty that folks had with APOC was just waiting too long, right? Waiting for the right moment, waiting to like really, really screw over your opponent entirely and make that APOC what you do to win the game. And I'm always like, I have two more and labor, and like I can APOC you like 6 times this game, right? And I think people forgot that like they just want to wipe entire board states, which is cool. I mean, I guess you're always wiping the entire board state no matter what, but they want to wipe massive board states, and I was always like, yo, your Asa and your first turn you installed 4 cards, and I have an APOC in hand. I'm APOCing you first turn. Like let's just start this game over right now.
Yeah.
The biggest casualty is running first click as an Anarch, even if you're not an APOC deck, against the central server, just to make the corporation bat an eye. Now it's all going to be run last click. That was the only reason.
Should we talk about? I mean, in terms of other Apex cards, I think. Oh shoot! I forget who it was. Was it John who was saying that it was just a list of tech cards?
That was me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that does not sound like a comment. Like that's too smart of a comment to come from me.
There are so many Apex cards that I've seen play in the last year. Like, if you look at the data in Destiny, every single one except for Prey, I think, has seen play in at least one major tournament.
Yeah, I remember that Endless Hunger tournament where you could use it to crash your Corp cards.
Hey,
Yeah.
it was played against us at a fight night, so clearly.
There have been Endless Hunger. Heartbeat has become like the most I hate PE card ever played, and like I've seen like quite a bit more play now that like core damage has become much more of a tangible thing. So you've seen Heartbeat Essa, you've seen Heartbeat as just a tech card in Hoshiko. You have Harbinger and Reavers in Flashpoint, which is also rotating, making the and Wasteland making the Aesop's engine, and then you have Hunting Grounds, which was one of the 2 Ag Infusion techs. So now everyone's going to be running Hush, which means all the Ag Infusions are going to be running Replanting instead of Enforcing Loyalty, 2 cards that, if you told me would see any competitive play 6 months ago, I would have rolled over dead. They're all goods. Apex did a service.
Hunting Grounds was huge. I mean, like, I remember slotting it in, like, I was using it on Data Ravens all the time. There was, like, some meta, like, I feel like 2019, like, you would run a Hunting Grounds in almost every deck just because it was, like, there was enough nasty on-encounter effects that it was just worth playing.
Yeah. Hunting Grounds and Direct Access turns off a Data Ward against Acme.
Sick.
One of these cards is not like the other. Should we talk about Adam? I think probably the card, the mini faction that this call has probably played the most.
Can I just give one last shout out for APOC, which is just to say that it won in Worlds 2022, which makes me really happy as a way for that card to go out, just like how I was super stoked for Max to finally win before she went out as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm supposed to do a little ode to Harbinger because I'm a huge Aesop's Pawn Shop lover, but I'll be honest, I was always a cash player over Harbinger, so I'm not actually that sad. So Adam, I would, if I was to guess, I think Adam is probably the most popular mini faction runner. For a bunch of reasons. I think his story is the best of the 3. Like, you immediately can identify with Adam. And then the directives, though, honestly, of the 4 directives, 3 of them are basically used, and without really much thinking, they make they make Netrunner feel very different when you're playing Adam compared to playing just about anything else.
Yeah. I will say, while they feel very different from the runner side, I actually don't think playing against Adam is that different strategically than playing against Criminal. Like, fundamentally, the way you deal with it is you defend your centrals, you play a bit slower, and you recognize that their tools are quite a bit more limited compared to Anarch or Shaper, and then you score outs. So I actually don't think it's going to change the corporation landscape very much, not having Adam as a threat, but it's definitely going to change how it feels to play as a runner.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Adam, it was the best kind of top-down designed runner. You had those directives, and it definitely felt like the most thematic of the three runners for me. Apex is just this kind of like, flip everything face down and then trash stuff, and as cool as America or Globo Corp's best mom is. I'm not a like two link isn't really a theme to me. It's you know it's a cool character, but like the theme itself of the Sunny didn't really do it for me. But Adam, like the idea of running, the idea of the Bioroid, the idea of the directives, all that just like came together amazingly, and I'll definitely be sad to see it go.
Adam had various ups and downs in different metas. I think it was, and it's like not even one of the cards that it's like the last Adam card I think that's still left in standard was like one of the big reasons to play Adam, and that will still be legal. And I am blanking on the name of the card. It's the
Logic Bomb.
No, okay, sorry. There's two Adam cards left then.
Yeah.
There's Logic Bomb, but then there's also the Tutor.
Emergent Creativity.
Algernon.
Thank you.
The thing about Logic Bomb and Emergent Creativity is even if both are playable, they're 5 influence.
Yeah, so it's very hard to play them outside.
Good reason to play Logic Bomb over Boomerang or Emergent Creativity over SNC.
The one thing I did like about Logic Bomb was that you could get through the Trieste model Bioroid stuff with it. So, I think it might have a little bit of utility, but that's definitely a tangent, not related to this.
And yeah, the emergent creativity for World Tree decks, one day those will come for us, right?
Yeah. As far as the cards that are rotating, I think that Multi-Threader is probably one of the bigger ones out of Adam. I know that a lot of, especially Shaper builds, can easily splash it. It's one influence. It does things like on pure hyperbarics, and just kind of makes it's like if you can't play Shezva because of influence or something like that, you play Multi-Threader instead, and it's almost as good out of Shaper.
Yeah. We should probably talk about Sunny, though I feel like Sunny is basically her console as the relevant cards in the for actual rotation.
I think there are like the Sherman Breaker saw some play, back when I guess Paperclip was too much influence for some people, and there weren't really a whole lot of other options like Cleaver. But Jack Sinclair, I think, has been splashed a little bit. It gives you a free run if you're, sure that you don't need to break any subs or anything like that. But yeah, Sec Nexus is definitely the big one.
Yeah, I'll also give a quick shout out to Shrike, a card I definitely play as a tech card against Tour Guide.
Fun memories.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thematically, why did Sunny have 2 link? Is it one because she's kind of like the hacker, but the other one she works for a megacorp?
I mean,
she plays both sides. So she always comes
plays
out
both sides, right? Was that thematically what was going on?
I assumed it was just because she's part of she's basically a government hacker. So like, I just assumed like she's got ins kind of, like, she's working for global security, so she's very well connected, more connected than anyone else. That was always my thinking. But yeah, I mean, Security Nexus is on like it has it. If you squint, it's not that different. It like has some familiarities with endurance, right? An 8-cost console that lets you beat a piece of ice, like that's an impactful effect. And this is a way to beat another way to beat the Loki, or was I guess another way to beat the Loki Ag Infusion decks. Is if you're just playing Security Nexus out of your Crim deck or something.
Yeah. I mean, the issue is that endurance was fundamentally an econ console. After you spend endurance like 2 to 3 times, it pays for itself. Security Nexus, if you don't have the link, will always cost you more and more money.
Yeah, this basically says play an 8-cost console. If you're Sunny, you then get to pay 2 credits to break a piece of ice, which is pretty different from saying break with 2 power counters that accumulate on the console itself. We're just running around.
Yeah, I do miss when you could like make money with power taps though. Those are the days.
Oh, those power tap decks are so good.
Yeah. Tech Rider's going. That's sad.
Yeah. It hasn't seen play in a little bit. I feel like it was kind of a Haley card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean tech writer, tech trader. I mean we have environmental testing, and I feel like that's kind of a, you know, as close to a reprint as we're gonna get of that.
Yeah, probably.
Hard to see anything Tech Writer ever outpace environmental testing. It's hard to see Tech Writer ever outpace Fermenter. It just sort of died to the econ apocalypse of the last
The
few
econ
years.
creep.
Yeah, and losing Haley. And then, Windfall held that pretty unique card place of being like, their a crew assembles around Windfall to try to figure out how do we actually make this card work, which, again, competitively not a thing, but just sort of, flavor for the meta.
We should also talk. I mean, we've mentioned it once already, but Employee Strike has been banned for quite a while, but like was like one of one of the like 2 to 3 current, one of the 5-ish currents that like just probably like basically brought the whole current war down, I think.
I mean, on runner side, it was Rumor Mill, and it was the Crim current, the one that 419 you.
Corporate Grant.
Yeah, Grant. Yeah, that's the one. And this one was like, this was the big one. You played against CTM, you played against Industrial Genomics, you played against CI, MT, like, you name it. Like every corp was doing something busted back then, and this was just kind of like the escape valve that runners pretty much had to play.
I think Employee Strike would still see play today because it would.
Oh yeah.
It off Ag Infusion. Like it slightly disrupts PD, sports, PE. Like
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Any deck that can fast advance doesn't really care that much about Employee Strike, from my experience. So sports and stuff like that isn't going to really care too much, but like Ag Infusion, absolutely.
And yeah, I was just about to say.
How gross would it be against Ob? You trash a border control and get nothing.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad that I'm glad that it got banned. I'm glad that it's seeing its way out, just because it allows corps to actually do their thing without having to worry about not being able to do their thing while they're scoring agendas, because that kind of placed an unreasonable constraint on corps that were building kind of glaciers and stuff like that, because they had to actually set up, and then they couldn't use their ability to actually score something.
Yeah, it is very interesting how like Cerebral Static, the Corp version of this card, was just not worth playing, and it just like it's one of those. I think it's like people have talked about this a lot, so I don't feel like we need to talk about it extensively, but just like it is one of the interesting like asymmetric emergent properties that like cerebral static is pretty bad, and then employee strike is like restricted, banned. Like it is just a incredibly powerful effect. But we should probably move on to Flashpoint. Do we want to talk about all of the banned cards up front, or do we want to just kind of talk about them as we go through faction by faction?
Yeah, let's get the banned cards out of the way.
Okay. I guess Corp side. I'm just gonna go Corp side. We got like maybe we'll just list. I'll just list a bunch, and we can pick out the ones we want to talk about. Friends in High Places and Violet Level Clearance were enormous cards for HB that were both like legal for long stretches of time and then eventually banned.
Yeah, I mean they were just both way above the power level curve. Friends in High Places, I think, in this current meta isn't as strong as it used to be back then with there's just a lot more asset support back in the day for Friends in High Places than there is now.
Oh, could you imagine like PE asset spam with Friends in High Places?
Oh, I mean, yeah, like you use this on upgrades now, and it would similarly suck.
Click Friends in High Places out 2 bladderworts.
You should.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think it's even really that bad if you're just installing assets. It's getting back keelings and stuff like that. That's really the issue for me.
Yeah, I mean, and there's even worlds where like, oh, you could PD could play this card where like, oh, the runner goes and trashes the Manic Arm and the Anoetic Void, and then you just go install my agenda, Friends in High like click for a credit, and then Friends in High Places those cards right back into the remote.
Yeah, it's the econ, getting back with Friends in High Places like Turtlebacks, Estelle Moon, all of those team sponsorship. There was a huge engine back then, and that was the reason why it got banned.
Yeah.
But like even with something like Tranquility Grid would still be pretty rough now just to be able to play this card.
Yeah, back then with Estelle and Turtlebacks, this was going to be my point with some of those decks like CI or whatever else. Friends in High Places was essentially giving you like 8 or 9 clicks worth of action, which was just bonkers. If you just counted up everything between the credits that you were gaining, cards that you were drawing, then off of Estelle Moon, the extra econ back on the board, getting Team So's back or whatever else, you were just getting literally. I mean, I think 8 or 9 clicks worth of actions just from that one card, just from playing it once. It was bonkers.
And in addition to Friends in High Places being very strong, it just was very tedious to play against as the runner because it just feels like a time walk. Like you just undid the previous turn, now we have to go and do that all over again. It's not, I guess, at least it wasn't for me, super interesting to play against, mostly because it just felt like we're just going to do last turn again.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree that's the biggest and best point. I think it just wasn't interesting, right? So I'll definitely jump on that bandwagon as well. And there are really good cards that do devastating things that are interesting to play against, and then there are really good cards that do devastating things that just kind of make you feel like why am I doing this, right? This feels just like horrible work. And I think Friends in High Places fell, for me anyway, into that latter category.
Yeah, for sure. Just in terms of other banned cards, I think Potential Unleashed is maybe the Jinteki is like the big one for Jinteki.
Pour one out. Now, what an idea right there.
For people who didn't think PE was grindy enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kakugo, I don't. Is that was like an earlier set, right?
It's actually a later set.
Okay.
Kakugo's red for Red Sand.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
But yeah, what an ID.
Yeah, I mean, this was. Yeah. I think that's Hasty Relocation never got banned, right? I don't think it did.
No.
Yeah.
Why would hasty relocation ever be banned?
Accelerated diagnostics.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see. But then we make it on to CTM, which actually maybe also didn't get any banned cards, but just his like is it Flashpoint is very clearly like you just a real shift in terms of the card printing power levels. So we have IP block, CTM, and hard hitting news, all very early in the pack, and then some other like periodic big players like Data Ward. Is probably the other big one, honestly, actually from the set. But that's still like a lot of hits for a single faction. Like CTM is one of the stronger IDs ever printed, even though it's not seeing a ton of play at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Although MBN is one of those decks that's always pretty good, I feel. Like, even if it's not at the top of its game, right? A good player on a CTM deck is always really, really dangerous.
For sure.
I hate to break it to you, but we haven't even scrolled down to the runner cards yet. Like, you're talking about busted stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So we'll talk about. We can maybe circle back to MBN in terms of other banned cards. I think nothing Weyland side.
No. Keep scrolling.
Yeah, there's one red card in there that.
Well, okay.
Oh, that's a fun one.
Orange card. There's an orange card. Excuse me.
Yeah, so we've got Scarcity, which like I can't I want to go and burn my like this is one of my most hated cards because I want to play Haley, and Scarcity often just said no, sorry, you don't get to today.
But that's what you get for playing Haley.
Yeah.
Scarcity was very fun in Ismari because you could play Scarcity, play Ismari, call event. They'd have to play one of those two. It was pretty strong.
Yeah. Preemptive action has also been banned, but we'll just move on from that conversation.
Can we go back up? We skipped one from Weyland.
Is Jonas sad
yes,
about Brian Stinson?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of busted cards, like, back in the day, you had the ultraviolet clearance.
Oh,
So
yeah.
You use this guy with ultraviolet clearance. You don't have to pay the extra clicks. You don't have to pay the 6 credits. So you draw an insane amount of cards. You gain 10 credits, and then you install another card. Like, this definitely has a reason for not existing in the current card pool, and very glad it's leaving. Shrink the ban list just a tiny bit.
And the fact that this is an upgrade too is like so silly. You're like, what's my safest server? Great, donk. And now I'm just gonna like get tons of money.
Oh, you want to deal with it? Oh, it costs 5.
Yeah. Just what a card. What a card.
There were conditions. Just have more than 6 credits.
Yeah.
Is there any world in which you trash Brian Stinson? Because the 5 credits you use to trash Brian Stinson, you could also just use to keep it above 6 credits.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, this was the 2016 deck, right, with Brian Stinson. You played this out of CI,
Yeah.
and you had the 2 clearances. You had MCA austerity policy to get lots of clicks, and what you did was you popped it for a lot of clicks. You played a reversed accounts, which you also splashed. You advanced it a lot to get the runner down to 0, and then you used Brian Stinson to play a free ultraviolet level clearance or something like that.
And then you install Sandberg.
Yeah, well...
You don't even need Sandberg. You can just score out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you saying Sandberg is a win more card? I could do other things with my money? No.
Yeah, Stinson was silly.
Yeah. In terms of banned runner cards, there's gonna be there's quite a few. Rumor Mill was a huge tech card, and was super obnoxious because when you look at upgrades that do stuff, or even a lot of assets that do stuff, They are unique assets and unique upgrades. And Rumor Mill just said, nope, you don't. And there was just so many corps that relied on cards like Caprice
Yep.
to
Jackson
go and
Howard.
actually score. And then it was like, okay, cool, I don't get to use Caprice, so now I can't actually score an agenda to then clear the Rumor Mill. And so I'm just completely dead if I'm playing some kind of Glacier deck that relied on it. Other things to shout out, like this blanks Jackson Howard, which was the main recursion tool at the time. It also blanked Stell Moon and a bunch of other cards, but like Rumor Mill just, which led to this very weird game with Jackson Howard, where like, oh, if you dumped agendas, you probably need to use Jackson Howard before the runner even took any actions on their turn, because if they played Rumor Mill, they just got to turn it off and then go and raid your archives.
It's kind of like the pause after you install Light the Fire. It's like, do you want to use that Spin Doctor? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, except that like, yeah, this would then turn off also future Spin Doctors you played as well, which was like just wild. Next up for ban cards, we got Cipher.
Not long for this world. It was pretty much instant ban, right?
I think it was not. Yeah, it was around for a very short period of time.
Like you guys that are sick of facing off against lots of buzzsaws and stuff like that. Don't know how good you had it. They had Yogg back in the day, and you could just be like, okay, cool. I'm just gonna break any code gate for free.
And this was also
around your maximum hand size by 1.
Yeah, such a
very real cost, according to
I
Dan.
don't think you've considered the implications here.
This was also legal, of course, with Parasite, so this was basically a destroy any ice for the cost of reducing your max hand size for the turn only by 1. So
I cannot believe.
Arguably the bigger interaction, yeah.
And then I think like the card that I think most this is one of the cards I always point to is like this card like just changed the game by being released for several cycles. Is Temujin Contract. This card has maybe one of the biggest numbers ever printed on a Netrunner card, which is 20 credits. And it just says, yeah, choose a server, place 20 credits on this card. When you make a successful run on the server, gain 4. And
like,
go ahead,
the
Jonas.
absolute worst case scenario for this is just you installed it on archives and ran 3 times. You got 12 credits back. So it was a functional day job. And then you had 8 more, whenever you wanted to take them off, whenever you felt like you could go there. But and that's a lot of what people used it for. And that was the worst case scenario.
One of my favorite Netrunner moments was I was doing a Hypercube draft at Mansion Runner, and I drafted the unused runner faction, the Syndicates, and Temujin Contract. And the Syndicate, for those who don't know, is a runner version of Jeeves. Whenever you do the same click 3 times, gain a click.
Oh god.
I literally could clear out my Temujin Contract in a single turn. Amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and like this card, the other really important, like the closest analog we have is the much maligned red team. And like a big important difference is Temujin Contract doesn't cost a click. So you can stack it with a Dirty Laundry. You can stack it with Medium. You can stack it with Desperate. Like it just stacked with everything. So it's just like, I remember Temujin came out and I immediately started getting much better at Netrunner because I just put 3 Temujins in all of my runner decks and was like, oh, I can like do my silly stuff and have money to do my silly stuff. And that slowly got me off of doing the silly stuff and just doing powerful things. But for a long time, I was a smoke 3x Temujin Contract Shaper player.
I do have to say, Temujin allowed a lot of not necessarily tier 1 runners to be competitively viable, just because it injected an obscene amount of money into all runners.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that is a thing it did. Mike, it's always like I wonder how much, because like Temujin contract was around for like a long time from what I remember. Like it was legal for I felt like like almost a year or something. Well, I don't
Yeah, it
remember
took a while
exactly.
for it to get banned. You know, it was a world's winner. It it was, I think, kind of deemed necessary because, I guess other corps could kind of do their own thing also very quickly, especially CI type corps or, fast advanced type corps. And so, like, I think, one of the end game plans with Temujin is not just sticking it on archives, but you would put it on R&D and you install medium or something like that, and it would cost like a couple bucks to get through the ice, but then you get your $4 back, and you just keep digging through R&D over and over again with it. And,
Yeah, that refund way of using it for those medium runs was just completely gross.
yeah.
And side note, I like flavor wise that from the title to the art to the flavor text, like this is a con card somehow, or has been like envisioned as a con, right?
To be fair, that's about the amount of money you need to make con viable.
Right, exactly.
In terms of another banned criminal card, we should probably also pour one out for Aaron Marone, which is one of those cards where like you look at it, I think, and you kind of go, oh, I mean, it's really good tag, and then you look at it a bit more and you're like, wait, isn't this just like really good? And that is kind of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Count Sypha and Aaron Moran was gross for a while they were
Yeah.
together.
I mean, this was in the kind of era of playing breaking news. Exchange of information was a card. And so, if somebody was trying to fast advance the breaking news and then exchange of information for, say, Global Food Initiative, Aaron Maron says, actually, you just scored. I'm going to remove the 2 tags you gave me. Um, you know, in terms of just, power level, it's off the chart, but also it had a lot of tech implications too. And I think it was actually banned quicker than Temujin contract, although, if I'm wrong about that, obviously, you know.
No, we can go and look.
Aaron Moran is
I
also
think
one of those cards where it's like, I mean, even if you try to, nerf it or something like that, you can imagine a version of this card that costs 4 credits, and it's only when an agenda is stolen and, right, or remove 1 tag or draw 1 card, and like do all those things. It's still absurdly strong.
Yeah.
That's how strong.
and the fact that this,
That's a
like,
great.
this is one of those,
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I don't think they released another card that gave you the ability in and of itself to instantly draw cards until Stone Chip. And that card still sees competitive play.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and they kind of separated
Well,
Aaron Marone out into No Free Lunch and to Stone Ship, right?
I mean,
As two.
so we haven't gotten to it yet, but there is First Responders D, and that was a key player back in the day, and you could instantly draw cards with it. So
Some days I cannot tell if you're being sarcastic. I'm gonna just read that.
I do it very infrequently, so it's hard.
But yeah, I mean, like the fact that Aaron Marone was a tech card that was then like still good to install in matchups where you were taking no tags at all was very, very impactful. Like if Aaron Marone triggered once, it basically he paid for himself, and then most games he's not going to trigger once because most games are about most games back then, and I would say for the most part now, though. Some people on this call are actively trying to make sure it's not the case. Most games are about scoring and stealing agendas. I think that's it
You want to talk?
for
I mean, we
banned
got some
cards.
dinky, I mean, we
Banned
got some
cards.
dinky runner currents like interdiction and government investigations. Those didn't really
Yeah,
see a whole lot of play.
those are banned by
Encore,
nature of being currents, right?
yeah, yeah. But Encore did used to be banned.
Oh yeah, it did. You're
Oh, that's
right.
too.
So,
Sorry,
a lot of
what'd you
decks
say, D?
were.
Net tap. That one's still on the ban list for some reason.
Oh, huh. Yeah, net tap is banned too. Yeah, whoops.
Rest in peace, net tap. I never got to see that one be good in my lifetime.
I think it's fine that one's staying on the ban list for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the ban list partially being like for the meta and then partially just having like a deterring effect. Like you just
I
put
mean,
GPI net tap to warn future devs.
Yeah.
I mean, GPI net tap I think would still be like okay right now because you still have Zomba and you could install 3 of these and approach an ice
So,
and boop 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 boop.
so as somebody who's actually like probably one of the only people who's won like an event with GPI net tap, I do have a fondness in my heart for it. It was absolutely disgusting. One of the big tricks that you used to be able to do, you can't do anymore, was if a Corp had installed 2 ice on any server, you could GPI net tap through the first one. They res it or do whatever with it. But when you got to the second ice, you could say, I'm going to use my GPI net taps to, get Zomba bucks, get Amakua counters. But then you didn't have to trash it to jack out. You could say, actually, once I took a peek, I'm just going to use my regular jack out action. And NSG, props to them. They got rid of that kind of loophole thing. And so, even with that loophole removed, I'm very glad that it's still banned. It was
NSG
classic case
all-
of it was a classic case of a card saying, whenever you do something, get this bonus. And when you stack a whole bunch of whenever effects on the same type of ability or synergy, it just kind of creates an engine that's a little bit too oppressive, essentially. And so yeah, pour one out for that. I will definitely miss it.
And it didn't even cost you an MU like how Snitch did.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, yeah, you were correct. Encore did get banned for a little while. This card is legal, has been legal for quite a bit. It got banned because of cold ones, right?
Yeah,
Which is
Cold
like,
Ones was like a West Coast deck from like 2017, I want to say. 2018, maybe?
I think 2017 sounds right.
Okay. But yeah, West Coast, won a pretty big tournament. It had all sorts of interesting players, but I think the general idea was to use click gaining actions like either Out of the Ashes or Hyperdriver, and then run all 3 centrals, play like a couple of encores, and then Apocalypse, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. And then you would use equivocation and some like some cards like Axara Serene, so that you would just have you'd have a big final turn, or you'd have or you'd have 3 consecutive turns where you could just run R&D and try and just like mill or steal out the Corp by just using equivocation to keep accessing cards, and you'd have 15 free accesses on R&D, which was usually enough to make it work, and you had a single notoriety to get you a little bit further. It was like this really big combo list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they were playing like origami or what was it or
Bookmark was the
bookmark.
hand
There we go.
size
Yeah,
check.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was some interesting combo deck, and I definitely liked the fact that combo decks like that exist, and there are definitely ways to fool it by like kind of just going a little bit quicker, or forcing them to try and combo without like a whole bunch of encores or something like that. Um, and yeah, like I am glad that it's unbanned now. It hasn't really done anything. I think that Rotage has been always keeping it in the back of his mind, but it was a fun card.
Yeah, I think that takes us to the end of the ban list. We spent actually a ton of time talking about that. I thought it was interesting. Hopefully everyone else did. We should probably talk about the rest of the cards that are in Flashpoint because there's a lot of them. I think though when I look at HB, there's like maybe two more worth talking about. I think the first one being Fairchild 3.0.
Also
This is-
banned for a bit.
Oh, that's true. It was banned for a bit. Yeah.
Good segue.
Yeah, I mean this is one of the big pieces of Glacier Ice that manages to sneak it into a decent amount of non-Glacier decks in one or two, just because it is a very, very strong ice for where it sits on the power curve. A 6 to res 5 strength with 3 relevant subroutines is a very strong piece of ice.
How many times has Fairchild 3 been in a World Champ deck?
Probably every HB one, right? That it wasn't banned in.
I don't think it was in Limes' deck. I don't even think it was in Rosen's deck because it was banned.
Yeah, it was just in the 2015 or no, the 2017 CI one.
And 2022.
Yeah.
Sports.
Yeah, but
Right.
I mean, regardless of that, it is still one of the strongest pieces of ice printed for HB, I think.
Of course.
So it's going to be a lot of power, I think, leaving in that respect. Arc Lockdown, I remember we were talking about it before the call, and Jonas letting out a huge sigh of relief that this card was going.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we'll talk about the bin breakers later. Like, obviously, Arc Lockdown is mostly used to get rid of paper clips or anytime somebody thinks that their bin breakers are safe. It kind of created a little bit of a scoring window for you to say no, you can't use that breaker in the bin this turn. And normally the runner would be like, haha, I have a second copy in hand, and it's a trap. But losing Arc Lockdown to hit bin breakers isn't really relevant. Like, I think that one of the things that Corps did use it a lot, especially fast advanced Corps, they used to Arc Lockdown clots so that they could purge and then Arc Lockdown a clot so that they wouldn't have to deal with constantly installing something like Mavirus on the turn that they're trying to fast advance. And not having that now means that the clot threats are going to be a lot more hard to deal with out of fast advanced corpse.
Yeah, the other thing this was used, that I remember was being used to shoot Levy AR lab accesses, just so that they couldn't be same old thing back into play, because often runners would discard them somewhat aggressively.
Yeah. Hellion beta test saw a little bit of play. I know that Oscar had some Hellion beta test type decks out of like Asa or something. I think it hit boat.
Yep.
Yeah.
That gave this card a little bit of a glow up that wasn't I wasn't expecting
But
necessarily.
I think everyone was desperate for objective trash a card
Yeah.
right then. Like, no one was really thinking about the implications of running Hellion beta test. They just saw trash cards and were like, maybe this will sink the boats. It did not sink the boats.
Well, it sank the Shaper boats. It didn't sink the Anarch boats.
Yeah.
Because it turns out Anarch prints money. So
Architects doesn't rotate, I think. It's in
Yeah,
the
because
core
that got
set.
saved in system update.
Cool.
I think that's it. So I think moving on to Jinteki, they've got actually, I mean, a lot of cards.
Rest in pain, Kusanagi.
Yeah, I, card I will not miss at all.
Oh my god. Either.
So help get us that one step closer to being out of the PE meta. I also think Ike going is like actually fairly relevant. Like this is a very good one cost code gate for grinder decks. Because it's pretty much always winning for the Corp. And like it was even seeing play in Glacier decks as like a relatively cheap early central piece of protection that, didn't bankrupt you, but the runner still had to respect.
I don't think Ike. I think the issue with Ike was with Obokata, it always had that sort of Nambo on centrals.
Yeah.
So like, it might have been different when it was like in the Pilana era, but at least with PE, what I've found is I put Ike on remotes, and it's good at protecting assets and like forcing the mill strategy. But often, if you put it on centrals, you're just asking them to fire it and steal your oboes.
It was definitely not, a brain dead piece of ice where you just have to like break all the subs, without even thinking about it. That, the third game subroutine was very relevant, for both sides really, because sometimes as the runner you wanted to see those extra cards, so that you could steal an Obokata or not die to snare or something like that. But other times, if you're running at last click, maybe the Corp wants you to draw 2 extra cards so that you then have to discard 2 and you're 2 cards closer to milling out or something. And so, it was very, very faction dependent. Anarchs generally, they're like, okay, cool, I'm 2 cards faster into my deck. Whereas, if you're trying to build more of an engine, like a Shaper or something like that, you're like, oh darn, I have 2 less cards now to, steal Obokata with or something.
Yeah, and Criminal was in a similar spot where they want to hold a lot of stuff in hand, and then just said, oh no, you have to have a plan for this if you want to keep your inside jobs or whatever. Then obviously the next card in this list, though not next really chronologically, is DNA Tracker, which is one of those cards that a lot of people are like, no, this breaks the rules of code gates. It does net damage and drains a lot of money. I mean, this is just a very, very solid, if your deck could afford to res an 8-cost piece of ice, which is often tricky in Jinteki, this was the premier one for a long time, and then a second premier 8-cost piece of ice came along as well. But
yeah, I mean it's kind of hard to say what the impact of losing it'll be. Like the next, what would you say that the next best code gate out of Jinteki is, like Vampirinasa or whatever?
Yeah, I think Vampy was intended to some extent as a soft DNA tracker replacement, but the numbers... Yeah. Well, actually, the reason I think Vampy is so much worse than Codegate than DNA Tracker was primarily because of its numbers against Black Orchestra. And with Black Orchestra gone, Vampy actually is comparable to DNA Tracker against, for instance, Unity, which I'm assuming we'll see a fair bit more play against, for instance, Mina's, I think, rotating, or...
Nope.
Mina's against Amina, it's actually quite a bit better. So, on the whole, I actually think Vampy stocks are going to go super up. The issue is that Vampy is also a lot more... you can let the subs fire. Since each...
Yeah, it's not as punishing a face check, right?
Yeah, I mean...
individual sub is doing less.
Yeah, DNA Tracker, like, if each thing fires, it's sapping 9 value out of the runner in 3 cards and 6 credits, which is a lot of value for this fired once and it's basically paid for itself.
I think overall it's okay that the power level of ice is going down a little bit. Hopefully.
No, I think that's I like that. I think it hopefully means that at some point we'll start depowering runner economy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is like, it's mostly the big range ice that are leaving, but there are still some ice that are, I guess, a little bit cheaper to res that are still kind of powerful, like Tithe or like an eminent. Like I don't know, maybe just like losing all these face checks is going to be rough, but like there's you still got Anansi floating around, so I don't see how, like, you still have to be careful, I think, especially around Jinteki.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Chiashi has also been seeing some.
Going to. I didn't even read two lines down. Yeah. All right, that might be a
I think
as well.
I think there is a pretty big difference between like having a huge pile of code gates that you can't face check without potentially almost losing the game versus having like a few ice that are like largely sentries that you can't face check without mostly losing the game.
Yeah, and that was like for a long time the rule against Jinteki was once you had your sentry breaker down, you could start actually like checking their ice. And DNA Tracker was the card that said, no, you can't do that anymore. And then Chiashi came along and said, no, you really, like, everything is going to be rude to you. So, yeah, I mean, Chiashi is seeing play again, right? Like out of Ag Infusion mostly because, yeah, if you can only afford to res one ice, Chiashi is a good ice to make count. So.
Yeah. I mean, send a message. Maybe it loses a little bit of value now that you can't res all these big ice anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that some of these bigger cards are going. Well, we should.
But I will miss Mind Game too. Like
oh yeah, that's true.
I thought it was like, I mean, it did cost you credit as the Corp, but like, it kind of has a pseudo Ag Infusion effect. It kind of varied in its relevancy. I think it was played at least a little bit in like some empty style decks. Right now it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to play just because it's you kind of need consistency in your ice, especially out of Jinteki, and this one requires a little bit of you. You need to have other stuff resed first. But I definitely think it was a cool big player.
Yeah, for sure. Well, should we talk about the NBN cards, which I think are maybe some of them and the Anarch cards are some of the most iconic of current standards still. Do we want to start with hard-hitting news?
Yeah, I think this is the most meta-defining card that's rotating by a long shot.
Yeah.
I think on both sides, right? Having it in your toolbox as a Corp, and then also learning or not learning how to play against it as a runner. I feel like when I wasn't always, a competitive player really in the game. I kind of had to make the conscious decision to, make that turn and start practicing with that in mind. And, prior to making that decision, I just loathed HHN, and I thought it was just so ruinous to the game. And I think one of the big things, when I was kind of like, all right, I want to be more competitive in Netrunner, one of the big things I had to learn was just how to play against HHN and how to play against HHN decks and to not, freak out about it so much. And then on the Corp side, to allow myself to play, super, super strong decks that, played HHN. So to lose a card now, I think, creates sort of a big gap in the meta in a whole bunch of ways that I'm super interested to see what the reaction to that is going to be.
Yo, Jeff. Is there a sheet or anything that shows the rotated cards that we're working from?
I think we're just scrolling down NRDB.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I'll
can
open
actually.
that up.
I could probably share my screen that's I'm using to look at NRDB. But yeah, I literally just pulled up the set panel.
Sure. I'll open that up.
And I'll probably do a quick introduction for you as well. But
Oh, there it is. Yeah. We're on MBN. Yeah, hard-hitting news is pretty important, isn't it?
Hey, did someone just show up?
Yes. Poor Jeff, he's gonna have to do so much editing now.
Like, when did you develop a British accent?
Hey, it's me. I gave warning and everything. I was like, I'm coming, half an hour, then 2 minutes. Yeah.
Checking Discord.
Just leave all this in, Jeff. It sounds really like natural, really disorganized. It's
believe me, I'm not cutting a second of this. This is
Oh
gold.
god.
yeah, it brings a lot. Yeah.
Quick, someone needs to say a brand in order to get this demonetized if he keeps Walmart.
Yeah, so we're joined by Patrick. Also
Hi,
known as
everyone.
Road of Appliance. To say the hit us with the world champ wisdom. Hard-hitting news is a big deal.
Hard-hitting news is a big deal. Yeah. Yeah, this is huge, isn't it? I mean, I don't know what other stuff is even in here, but this has got to be one of the biggest rotations, period, doesn't it, of all the factions?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think maybe just as you were coming in, Patrick, that I think it is the biggest by a long shot.
Yeah, I think, yeah, like how good any replacement is or not is going to determine a lot. And yeah, a lot
It's
of
the card you play around turn 1 as runner.
Yeah.
Like, that's always my first question turn 1. Will I be able to get above usually around 9 credits and make a run this turn? Or am I just going to let the Corp proceed completely uncontested?
Yeah, like even trivial stuff like dirty laundry actually becomes a fair bit better without this, right? Because you can play it turn 1 so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge difference when this goes to be able to say, yeah, I can, check remotes. Like, if you install 2 cards and I don't have a strong econ start, I can now check those cards, barring any replacement, right? I could just go and check those cards to see if there's a Rashida in there and then not have an econ follow-up right away and not lose the game. Whereas
Or you can play daily casts or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, you have like 2 credits, and it's like, okay, now what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a huge deal. And like Hard-Hitting News has seen play in every faction but Jinteki, I think. Like there was some Hard-Hitting News Asa decks for a hot second there, but then like NBN and Weyland their whole design space for since Hard-Hitting News was printed has been a lot about how they interact with this card and how this card sets the tempo of the game. Yeah, it's like we're going to talk about 3 other cards that are super important to rotate, but to me, this is probably the most important card that's rotating, just in terms of how much it shapes both sides of the table and card design. Making 4 tags is a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can't disagree with that.
Does anyone not think this is the biggest card rotating, or are we navigating that?
I think that paperclip rotating is a pretty huge deal too, but we'll get to that.
I think Misdirection and Citadel Sanctuary rotating goes Kid and Parcel? Pit and Parcel?
Hand in hand.
Fine, hand in hand.
I don't know.
Kit and Caboodle and something in Parcel, but doesn't matter.
So on the topic of tags, I'm curious how much this will change like the viability of runners going tag me, because we're losing Data Ward, we're losing IP block, losing, I guess, Observe and Destroy. People barely played that. We're losing Resistor, we're losing All Seeing Eye, which were like pretty significant tag punish cards. All of those. Oh, we're losing QPM. Did I say that one? Yeah.
We talked about it earlier, but yeah.
Right, but like all of these cards contribute to making the runner's life a lot harder when they go tag me. So losing that, I'm very curious about how playstyle changes versus tag decks.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the theory is that, excuse me, that market forces and self growth program will still be in the card pool. So if like we get super heavy into tag me, like those will exist, but like that is a little slim in terms of tag punishment. It's like, okay, what else do we have? It's like shipment from Flashpoint Grid and freedom of information, both of which are kind of conditional on having agendas, as opposed to these other punishments that are like, no, I just get to wipe out the runner's board. That's going to be a big change.
Yeah, like market forces is maybe the single biggest one if you're trying to beat tag me decks. But yeah, you are slimmer on options now, and you can play around market forces to an extent.
Yeah, and it's harder to main deck market forces without a card like HHN in the deck, because you just need some way to give the runner a lot of tags, and so it's like, again,
Yeah.
if Public Trail is going to be what leads the meta in terms of how we tag people.
I doubt it. I doubt it. No,
Yeah,
no free
we'll,
lunch is still a card.
yeah, maybe we'll get a what's it called, a Big Brother reprint. Was that the one that was like?
It looks like
Big
was a
Brother,
fun
yeah,
one.
they have to be tagged and then they get 2 more tags, right?
But like I think that the other kind of big casualty here is that Acme isn't rotating, but all the ice that work with Acme are rotating.
Yeah.
I'm okay with this.
I mean, yeah, it was a pretty obnoxious deck to play against, and it was certainly at least a mid player, definitely tier 1.5 in a lot of metas. But yeah, like IP block is certainly like the biggest, like one of the biggest ice in my mind to be rotating. Like, some of the big Jinteki ice rotating is rough, but like spoiler alert, Almakua is not rotating, so IP block leaving the meta, um, will definitely change how some runners, I guess, kind of approach things.
Yeah, I
Very
mean, IP
commonly
block.
splashed as well, isn't it? Like, yeah, I played this in probably every faction at some point, so yeah, even just in straight Glacier. So yeah, it's a big change.
Yeah, I mean, this redefined the face check penalty. Like, the best barrier before this was probably Eli 1.0, and then this got printed, and suddenly it was just IP block was just what you slotted instead, because it had a face check penalty, and then usually cost the runner like something like Trace 3 ends up being kind of comparable to 2 clicks in a lot of places, and then also had AI punishment, so it just bundled a lot of really good effects onto one card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely a big loss for NBN.
Yeah.
And for, I guess, everyone, as we've been talking about. I guess the last NBN card we should probably talk about, of course, is CTM. I think we talked about it briefly a little bit, but just don't know if anyone else wants to give it some final words, so to speak.
CTM was always what I ran when I had no idea what to run. Like, its effect is always good. It was probably one of it and Hard Hitting News were the biggest link enablers. So because they're gone, link runners are going to become an absurd amount weaker. Like, I think Link was one of the key reasons folks always ran Lats instead of like other shapers. So Lat stocks are going down, 419 stocks are going down. So I'm gonna miss CTM, but I think it's I don't think a single corp has had it better than CTM. Maybe Sports Metal. Like, it's hard to feel that bad for it.
I'm just glad we
Yeah,
don't
it's
have
great.
Toby on the call with us, because Toby was like one of the CTM experts here,
Yeah.
and like he could make CTM work with like a paper bag and a ham sandwich and all those sorts of idioms.
I've seen him do that once,
I-
and I lost to that deck. It was terrible.
Yeah, that was what? That was 2020 Worlds, right? Like CTM was not a meta presence, and he just piloted casually the second.
Yeah.
And
It's the
and like
cockroach that was just impossible to kill.
yeah, like CTM hit the high of like always running worlds. Like it was a world. There was a world where it was basically the only Corp deck played, and then its lowest low is probably right now, where it is solidly tier 1.5 probably. Maybe tier 2, but it's like up and it's been just permanently a meta presence since printing basically. So
Yeah, I'm gonna
definitely going to
miss it.
be a huge loss
Miss
for
running
me.
against it as well, but I didn't play it as much as some people. I played it when it was really broken when it came out, and like a little bit here and there. But I'm certainly going to miss the challenge of running against it and like squashing it as 419 and stuff like that.
Oh, Pat.
Yeah. I think anyone. Maybe we should move on to Weyland cards
Yeah.
quickly. There's like, okay, there's like three big. Well, okay, there's four Weyland cards at least that we have to talk about. Boom, I think is to me probably the most important one. I think like this has been the defining kill package for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, it's you know, I think that part of Boom's ubiquity is that it does everything in one card. It just ends a game. Um, unless you're playing against something like an Obelisk Tag Me deck, it's just, if you got the tags and you got the money, then you got the kill. It's a small package. It's 3 influence, and yeah, the fact that now you have to, play things that don't necessarily end the game, like end the line, market forces, or retribution, stuff like that. Like it's definitely going to make it so that, barring some sort of a shakeup, runners can feel safer taking multiple tags.
Yeah, we usually see if we see Corps just go, okay, fine, I'll play two end of the lines, and at least they can't be trashed, or if kill packages have to look very different or just don't exist. Because like kill packages also relied on hard hitting news to land their tags. Like it was very nice to splash back and forth because 2 copies of Boom into NBN or 3 copies of HHN into Weyland were both 6 influence, and you can usually make that work for most decks.
Yeah. I
Let's
think
see.
with Boom Begone, tag games are going to be a lot longer and a lot less fun. Like, usually the benefit of being tag stormed is you at least get to die the next turn.
Or you try and find the Boom and you snipe it out, and then you're like, okay, I can just run with impunity for however many turns it takes for them to
Get the
shuffle it
next
back.
Boom.
Exactly. But like I really like the trash cost on this card in particular, and with stuff like archive memories being banned, it makes it so that it's actually a little bit. It was a little bit fragile of a kill plan that you could at least interact with a little bit.
Yeah, Gaslight is the new one that sort of gives you a free Boom.
Oh yeah, I mean, but again, that's also interactable. You've got trash costs on it. It's
Absolutely.
yeah, it's trash costs are good on things like combo kill type stuff, and I thought it was a meta defining card, but a very fair card.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think HHN. I think everyone like we figured out how to play against it, but it is I think fundamentally a little unfair in a way that I think Boom is like fundamentally actually quite fair.
Yeah.
It has a big ask of the Corp and multiple avenues of runner attack. So it's it's going to be missed, but I think every card should go at some point, and I think this is a good time for Boom. As good a time as any, I guess. I'm gonna skip. Well, we can. Bulwark is probably. I'm just jumping around a little bit randomly here. Bulwark. This is gonna be a big deal for the outfit, right? This is a bad pub barrier that's annoying to break as the runner, even when the Corp has a bunch of bad pub. Like that's a thing the outfit is going to sorely miss. I think. I don't know that there's that much else that needs to be said about it, but.
And I think the big ice loss is Mouseless for Weyland, right? Probably the biggest one, the one in my mind anyway that's most equivalent to NBN losing IP block, Jinteki losing Ike or DNA tracker, and HB losing FC3.
Might be the best central ice in the game. Like, it's 4 to res and often like 5 even for the best breakers to break, and then 9 for Black Orchestra. What a race!
There have been very, very few games where I've ever seen this advanced, but like the card is so good without being advanced that that doesn't really matter. Yeah, no, I think this to me is probably the second biggest Weyland card that's going.
So I do think that one card that's made a pretty big appearance recently that I'm very happy is going is Stock Buyback.
Yes.
Justin Payne.
Yeah. I mean that card, a lot of the fake point stuff is rotating. But you still got stuff like Nightmare Archive and this, especially being 2 influence, made it pretty easy to splash in kind of an HB package with fake points and Giordano Memorial Field and stuff like that. And it wasn't a style of play that I wasn't particularly excited about. It was a very kind of, slow central accesses don't matter type of game plan. And, I think that with this card rotating, it makes central accesses at least a little bit less painful, to actually steal 1-point agendas and not feel like you're actually helping the Corp.
Yeah, I think it's, that Masscom got banned, but this survived, I think, is a little bit of a travesty, but, so it goes. I think, let's see, other cards, pour one out for Sandberg. I won't be sad to never have to play against that again. Macrophage had a moment in the sun with Sandbox. It's been not relevant since then, really, though. Like, honestly, with the amount of fermenter that's around, like, it might just, because fermenter's in every runner, like, you might be able to just, splash Macrophage anyway and not be too sad about it.
I guess Prizek is the biggest one here, isn't it? As the neutral cards, and then like a little bit of Nassux, I guess. But
yeah,
I think that best defense. I mean, misdirection is kind of leaving the meta, but I do think that best defense was an interesting retribution style card that you could use to like hit 0 cost cards even if they're not tagged. And I thought that was an interesting, kind of way to. I guess kind of play an interesting tech-style game. Hit a self-modifying code or, sacrificial construct. Any other strange 0-cost card. It was a fun card that made a little bit of an appearance.
Okay, so I mean. Let's move on to Anarch is alphabetically first, and I think probably like this video is a lot about Paperclip, Black Orchestra, and MK Ultra. Like these have been defining standard since they've been printed in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean these define so much of the Anarch faction, don't they? Like a lot of decks are playing moshing, and I think like just generally very resilient to self damage. It allows them to play things like Zero, things like whatever it's called, Banker, and you're often quite happy to take the damage. And I think that's going to change a fair bit when you're playing breakers that you don't want to be in the bin. And I mean, I guess not just Anarch, right? Paperclip is just the best fractor in the game, so everyone has to find new solutions. They have to find some different sort of a rig.
Cleaver?
Cleaver seems to be like what I'd guess is going to see a lot of play.
It seems like there has actually been a decent amount of Anarchs, I guess, moving away from the bin breakers. Even now, like Botulus, Bankar, you're seeing some like of those fixed breakers with turbine. So it's going to be a big change, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to be horrible for Anarchs. It's probably not going to be great, but I don't know that it's going to be horrible.
Yeah, it'll be rough for criminal, definitely. I think paperclip was their biggest thing, and I think that the second kind of breaker suite used the K2CP turbine to kind of pump up buzzsaw and cleaver and stuff like that. And I just don't think that criminal can really kind of do that in the way that Shaper and Anarch do.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the paperclip to cleaver shift hurts criminal that much, because in fact cleaver is sort of more in line with the current criminal strategy of like assembling your rig piecemeal using mutual favor. Where like it was very rare that criminal was making the most out of paperclip. They were just using it because it was numerically the best breaker by far. Cleaver, I think Shaper and Criminal can actually sort of use as fully, or in Shaper's case, more efficiently than Anarch did.
Yeah, a lot of the big barriers are going, aren't they, as well?
Yeah, no Chiashi, no Bulwark.
Data ward.
Yeah, no Chiashi, no Data Ord makes the Cleaver turbine setup a lot more viable.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think it's interesting because you're like when you look at the numbers, like, oh, Black Orchestra is a terrible breaker, MK Ultra is a terrible breaker, like Paperclip super efficient but it costs 4. But it's like often it's the thing that I've been trying to think about a lot, like what actually makes these so good, and a lot of it is it's like two things. One, you never have you don't spend the click to install them until you actually need to, which is
Yep.
like that's such a big difference, right? It's like, yeah, Cleaver is basically as good for all of the non-rotated barriers, if not in some cases a little bit better, right? Like if you want to fully break border control, like it's only 1 credit with Cleaver rather than 2 with Paperclip. But that you have to spend the click and time and have it down before you go and start the run is like such a big difference in terms of the gameplay pattern. And then there's also the thing of like, oh yeah, how do I actually get paperclip in the bin? Often I spend the click to draw it. So instead of spending the click and the credits to install up front, I'm actually basically saving twice on the tempo because I'm drawing a card instead of spending that time installing. So my action is just that much better.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference.
And also, if you don't like install it until you actually need it, things like Paladin keep ticking up, and a lot of the times these cost like 1 or 2 credits just to install, anyways.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
have
for sure.
like far fewer awkward draws, don't you, compared to say Crim, where sometimes you just draw like a bunch of cards that you can't discard, but you don't want to install yet. Here, you just draw past it and throw them in the bin, or throw them in the bin for benefit if you've got moshing. It just feels a lot easier, and especially against net damage decks, I suppose you benefit sometimes from the damage, whereas Crim, sometimes you might be paralyzed, or you might think, I can't run because I'll lose the bug halter or whatever. So it's probably one of those things you just sort of appreciate when you play the two side by side. But I think I've noticed a big difference as someone who played a lot of Crim before and have played a bit more Anarch in this meta. I think it just makes it a lot smoother going through your deck.
Yeah, I think that's in terms of other cards to talk about. Omar never saw that much play as like an identity on his own, but like so hasn't seen much play at all recently, but like was a really important card in the Anarch card pool because Rebirth existed for a long time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that one of the big hitters here is Obelisk. Um, Tag Me has always been kind of lurking in the meta and really only struggled with decks that played things like market forces. A lot of times they could actually handle taking a boom to the face rather well. But with Obelisk gone and Boom gone, I think that the kind of tag me landscape changes a lot because you can't just hold a gazillion cards in hand anymore.
Obelisk also enabled Tag Me Zaya because of the second ability's synergy
Mm-hmm.
with Zaya's interest in multi-access. So, as a result, the Tag Me landscape might tend toward another Crim faction or might tend more toward Anarch or Shaper. Probably not Shaper.
It'd be great if it did, but as a diehard Shaper player, no, I like the Obelisk. My favorite Obelisk interaction that like never actually came up that often because it was mostly rotated. But like the Hades Shard Obelisk interaction, I always thought was a lot of fun.
So sad.
Which,
Oh, I love that one.
yeah, for those who are newer to the game, Hades Shard lets you access all the cards in archives at paid ability speed, and so you could make a run on R&D or HQ, pop the Hades Shard, and then when the run ended and Obelisk triggered, it would count all those cards you accessed in archives because you accessed them during a run on that central. And so you could just like draw half your deck in one shot, which was a lot of fun. Should we move on to the Crim cards?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right.
Tapworm gone.
Yeah, Tapworm is a big one. Well, I mean, it's not actually that big at the moment, but like there was a whole runner archetype for a while that was like Tapworm plus Sacrificial Construct, and that was just like Corp's always printed money, and they printed so much that this was just a good way to get ahead.
I think that the Europeans are generally pretty high on Tapworm as a control type card. I know that we don't usually play Tapworm a whole lot, but I do know that it certainly has made a lot of appearances even now. I think that it gets outpaced a little bit by something like Fermenter, because Fermenter, there are a lot of cards that all kind of invite purges, like Fermenter, Almakua, and Tapworm. And I think that Tapworm, like, doesn't justify itself as much as the other two do.
Yeah, it's the most conditional of those three, right? Like Amakua, you make runs, you're trying to make runs. If you're not making runs, you're losing anyway. Fermenter is sitting, you do nothing and it makes you money. Tapworm then says, okay, well, if the Corp is in this board state and you're in this other board state, then you do stuff, and that's like inherently going to be.
Yeah, it dislikes the Bladderwort decks, doesn't it? I guess that's like a really bad matchup for it, and they are pretty popular at the moment. So I did consider it for my UK Nats deck and drifted over to Bankroll in the end, which I found a bit better in that deck. But I mean, there's not actually that much here, is there, in the Crim card pool? I'm looking down, and probably Tapworm is the most relevant. Like, what else is there? Hernando, I guess.
Lam was
Slightly
played a fair bit.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in ages, but it was played a bit more in the past.
Tracker was for the
the briefest
Minicivic grid decks. Hernando Cortez sees occasional play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
I think
not a whole lot of hitters that haven't already been banned.
Mostly what this Crim rotation is doing is making the ban list shorter.
Yeah.
Aaron, Marin, and Temujin. Yeah.
I think Shaper side, like this actually, like I wasn't thinking about this being super impactful, and then I go and look, and I'm like, oh, actually, this is gonna like make quite a bit of difference. I think.
That's good. Shapers need nerfing, clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, like, pour one out for stealth, really.
Yeah, stealth is, I think, probably dead with smoke going.
Oh yeah, this is brutal. Oh, Beth.
Beth.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's like smoke is and like stealth as a whole is an archetype that like goes up and down in popularity. Like it really requires a pretty ice focused meta to be relevant. And when it's good, I think it's not one of the archetypes that like competitive players love that much, because it just kind of says, "Oh, I'm just gonna break all your ice super efficiently," and that's also become like just less relevant as like cards like Botulus have gotten printed, where it's like, "Oh yeah, the runners probably are already breaking things efficiently without jumping through lots of hoops." But and then Netmarker obviously is the other the companion to smoke, so much so that it has smoke on it, right?
Yeah,
And
like you could try doing a stealth build without smoke, but if you don't have Netmarker, you can't do stuff like pay for after image without jumping through significant hoops. So it kind of makes it so it's not really worth going into that package.
yeah, I remember having a lot of debates with people of like why I liked Dagger more than Switchblade, and I was like, well, it's because the difference between getting 1 stealth credit and 2 stealth credits is like such a big deal, and without Netmarker kind of made that argument a little bit silly, and you should probably just always be on Switchblade. But like it still is going to hold true for the future, where like cards like After Image that require multiple stealth just like they don't make much sense when you have to find 2 other cards to make your breaker work. Like
Yeah, it's going
that's
to
a big
return
ask.
to. It's going to be sort of what it was like before smoke, isn't it? As an archetype, which is like very rarely someone will try it, or it's a bit of a janky thing. But I don't think it's going to see any competitive play whatsoever, unless I'm completely missing something.
Yeah, no, I agree. But then, I think Kat called out Beth, which is
Beth is a shame. Yeah,
a 1 of in every Shaper deck. Some people would argue it should be a 2 of. I'm not one of them, but
2 of is where you really can't find anything else to put in the deck, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, deep dives get a little bit harder, I guess. Out of Shaper.
That's true.
I'm interested about Misdirection because I know that a lot of even out of faction players are starting to play Misdirection now.
Yeah, I mean the big thing about Misdirection in Citadel was it took the click cost in a lot of ways from multiple tagging. So suddenly all the cards like Amaze Amusements and Forced Connection that give 2 tags that I was just like, oh, but the click cost doesn't really matter. 2 tags can often just be 1 tag. These are too wonky to be worth it. Suddenly feel so much stronger because they can take
even a card that I think I panned in my spoiler video, like Check It Scion, starts looking much more interesting. Where it's like, oh yeah, for a single advancement token, like I get to make the runner spend like 2 clicks and 4 credits, like, and it's not going to be that sometimes they'll just like, or like, if you stack them up a little bit, like, oh, it starts looking interesting, and Amazing Amusements is probably the better one, honestly, still. But yeah, like these, if there's some kind of tagging package, like runners more or less have to trade click for a tag. It looks like, unless there's some click efficient clearing options being provided.
Yeah, I mean, hard hitting news is going, and this is going, so maybe just there isn't going to be a whole lot of multi tag stuff. Unless something comes out to replace hard hitting news, but like. I think Misdirection was like one of the biggest checks on hard hitting news, and so them both going is kind of going to be a very much a new meta.
I will enjoy getting the slot back, because whenever I make a Shaper deck, I inevitably forget to put Misdirection in slot. Walk into my first game and go, oh shoot, this is like my only way of keeping up against all these HHN decks. Lose the first game and then have to go and find a slot. And it's like always the most annoying.
You have to bluff it, don't you? You have to play as if it's in your deck and hope they believe you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, they'd only make this run if they had the Misdirection on tap with this SMC, so I'm not going to bother playing the HHN here. It's like when you forget to be able to put Clot in the first draft as well. You just start playing like you have it.
Yeah.
Oh, you always play like you have Clots.
I will shout out. I love both Top Hat and Equivocation. They're not good R&D multi-access, but they're really fun R&D multi-access. Where you get to
Top
feel like
Hat
you're making
is, Top
smart
Hat is
choice.
big, like World Tree Food, isn't it?
Yeah, that was
Trendy
it
use
was
for it.
Oh right, I forgot that was the only reason you played Top Hat in this meta, was to get your endurance for 3 less.
Yeah.
Yeah, or once you had your endurance down, you could like get Cyberdelias out of your deck so that you had long-term econ. Cyberdelia for 0 is like suddenly a playable card.
Yeah, that was all it took.
I guess it's like Top Hat plus that event that I've forgotten the name of.
Oh yeah, what?
Used briefly, wasn't it?
Insight?
That's the one. That was a thing
Yeah.
in some meta for a little bit, not recently.
Yeah, no, I remember showing up to a store champ and a Chaos Theory Top Hat Insight deck beating me and
It's such a Jeff deck, though. I hope you took it up after losing to it.
I didn't, but I should have. I think it was even on Comet. Like it was like all out on silliness. But yeah, I mean, like the losing Bath, Misdirection, Smoke, and Netmarker, like basically every Shaper deck is going to feel some of those losses. And like it's not like, and every runner's going to feel the loss of Paperclip. Basically, like it's just been the best barrier break to run. I think Shapers will have an easier time with something like a Cleaver than a Paperclip. That transition should be easier for them than it is for Crim, as Dee was talking about. But we have some also really impactful runner neutrals that are going.
Yeah,
I think Deuce's Wild is a big one. This is in basically almost every competitive runner deck right now.
Yeah,
I
kind of.
mean, I think that like Asa probably doesn't play it all the time, but like it's just it really rewards a lot of you know, just playing smart with it. Like, you know, versus tagging decks, you've got the game 3 shake a tag versus decks that are trying to stuff you with ice. You got the expose option. Um, you know, it's a lot more than just a cantrip a lot of the time.
Yeah. Other neutrals that matter: Peace in Our Time for Shaper Durdle decks is, you know, relevant, though those don't exist that much. And then as
playing what's it called? The new NBN operation. Exchange.
Non-equivalent exchange.
Yeah, if Corps can play non-equivalent exchange and feel good about it, surely runners can start playing.
No Corp feels good about it.
I feel like it should be a shame because even in this,
there's no Corpse feeling good about it.
In Our Time, also known as Game Lost in Our Time, because it's got so many conditions on playing it correctly that inevitably runners, you will either play it after they scored an agenda or try and make a run after gaining 10 credits, because that's what you want to do with all that credit injection.
It's such a poor practical choice in real life tournaments because of the additional risk of and if you're smart as the Corp, after they play it, you start talking to them about something else, and then you hope that they make a run in the same turn. You just start talking to them about their deck or the weather or something, and then they'll probably make a run. Like, good players have had game losses with Peace in Our Time.
Yeah. And Dee also mentioned it, but we should give it a proper little section here. Still, Sanctuary has been like
huge,
just a persistent like kill and tag tech card. So he's playing Hoshiko with not a ton at the moment, because that deck just prints so much money that it kind of bypasses the need for it a lot of the time. And then Crim pretty much is always playing this, and with 419 being the premier Crim deck, this basically reads as install this resource and then you get to remove a tag for free at the end of every turn, because the trace one, like, it's often losing for the Corp to pay into this.
Yeah, so you can't really, like, the whole Nexus package is gone. Nexus is gone, but, like, you know, tag me stuff like rogue trading, you can't play this with Citadel anymore. And it also had kind of, you know, a little bit of utility against City Works project and other Weyland like tagging stuff. Like they could play like mutually assured destruction or something and combo kill you out or something. And with Citadel, they had to find yet another piece to kind of deal with that as well.
Punitive as a sort of marginal.
Yeah,
thing as
punitive,
well.
definitely. Like, it definitely kept you safe.
Yeah, and I think the final card, which I think we shouted out briefly, but like Reaver going is big for Shaper players and those people that really want to try and make Apex work. But Reaver Shop has been an okay to solid deck for many years, and turning your Aesops into draw a card and gain 3 credits clicklessly, pretty good.
Yeah, it's significant. I guess Find the Truth was like occasionally played in like Reg Val and maybe 1 or 2 other decks.
Oh yeah, Find the Truth is definitely worth a shout out because it like made Adam playable again after the release of Hard Hitting News. Because just always be running meant you really couldn't be Adam until this card was an option. But yeah, I think that's the end of the rotation. Thank you. Anyone have final thoughts?
I missed like loads of it, but I've just realised Fairchild 3 is going, and that's pretty sad. Pretty sad about that. I guess we'll have to play Bran though, just to hate on those cleavers as much as we can.
Is Bran the biggest? Oh no, Pharaoh's advanced is the highest strength.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Pharos everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go to a Pharaoh's brand meta.
Yeah.
Finally.
It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Like, I think that the big shakeups for me, bin breakers, tags, and global food initiative are probably my biggest 3. Oh, and apocalypse. Apocalypse going is definitely interesting. But like there are a lot of cards that it'll be interesting to see if they're replaced, how they're replaced, and should be interesting.
Yeah, very big shake up. Look forward to it.
Yeah, it should be quite exciting. All right, well, I want to thank all of you for coming on. Thank again to so thanks Jonas, D, Kat, and Patrick, and then also John, who had to duck out before we did this final section. Thanks everyone for listening and watching, and look forward to what the upcoming spoiler season is going to bring us. I think I'm hoping it's going to be a fun one.